What's up guys, it's Chili here. Today I want to talk to you guys about the world of Age of Empires civilizations. And today we're going to be playing around with Google Earth, looking at all of the civilizations that we currently have in the game and all the civilizations that I hope that we can add into the game sometime in the near future. This is my first time using this tool. This is pretty cool. And I went ahead and added all kinds of flags of current and potentially future civilizations, just so you guys can see what we currently, where everything's located. And we'll go through each one and talk about like the history and what I think, why I think it would be a cool addition into the game. Let's start by turning off a lot of these civs, and we'll just have the original 10 civs added in. The original 10 civs listed here first. Obviously we have the Holy Trinity of starter civs, the English, the French, and the Holy Roman Empire. I really like the way the game designed these three civs. They're obviously the three of the most popular civs in the game for a long time. They are all very beginner friendly. They all have a very standard, relatively standard roster with not too many unique units and unique mechanics. The English have the longbow, the French have the Royal Knights, and the Germans have the Prelate, which is a buffing priest. But their focus is more on infantry. I also like that each of these civs has their own kind of like area of focus. English love ranged and defensive long-range castles. The French have really high damage, and they're all about like being an offensive powerhouse, raiding and charging. And then the Germans have they're kind of defensive and static with a large infantry ball army, focused on infantry and just kind of being a really tanky. What's the word? An unstoppable tanky infantry ball, basically. All right, moving on. What are the civs we have here? The Rus. The Rus are a little bit of a what's the word? Non-standard civ. They're focused around hunting. They have a very good economy enabled by that hunting. They have very good woodcutting bonuses, and they have a lot of tools that give them a lot of map pressure. So they're really good at securing map control. More powerful towers, better wooden walls, and powerful knights. And let's go on to the Ottomans. Now, the Ottomans are one of the newer civs added in the Anniversary Edition, the Ottomans along with the Malians. Both of these civs are a bit more unique compared to the standard civs in the roster, but the Ottomans in this case are probably a little bit more basic compared to the Malians. Their focus is more on the military schools, which allow for free military unit production, and their late game is really powerful with the Great Bombard mixed with the Janissary, so a lot of really strong siege and gunpowder units for this faction. The Malians, on the other hand, are a bit of a wild card faction. They have all kinds of unique units. They don't play by standard rules. They don't have men-at-arms, for instance. But they do have really powerful Sofa, which are kind of like a medium cavalry / heavy cavalry kind of knight replacement. So really powerful cavalry, and historically speaking, they're kind of located on this band in between the, you see this like green jungle area down here and the Saharan desert up here. This middle area band is just wide sweeping grassland known as the Sahel. The Sahara desert has grown over time, so the Sahel used to be a little bit larger, but now, as you can see, the desert's kind of encroaching further and further into the jungle lush area, all thanks to climate change, I assume. I think the term for this is desertification, something along those lines. Anyways, the Sahel is basically like the steppe lands for Africa, really great grazing areas for horses. So it's good that the Malians have really powerful horse units, and then a lot of their infantry units are actually sourced from Benin, which is a civilization located down here, and we'll actually talk about them in just a little bit. Moving on, the Abbasids. These guys are all about having a really powerful econ with the House of Wisdom, all kinds of econ bonuses, building multiple town centers, spamming all kinds of units, archers that are really good, infantry that are really good with the Ghulams, camels, all that good stuff. And then Delhi Sultanate. These guys have scholars that can research technologies for free, but it just takes a lot of time. They also have elephants, which are kind of underwhelming in the game right now, so I'd love to see better elephants in the future. The Mongols, these guys are kind of organized as like the nomadic steppe empire they were in history. The Mongols in the game, however, aren't really playing all that nomadic, and their cavalry units have been nerfed multiple times. Their Mongol is their most iconic unit. It's a horse archer that can shoot and move at the same time, but it's been nerfed so hard that you basically never see it in the game. So now Mongols are just kind of like, I don't know. Their identity is a little bit weird right now, and I'd love to see them recapture that nomadic spirit sometime in the future. And then we have China over here, which is one of the economic powerhouses of the game. Really strong late game with gunpowder units and all these different kinds of unique Chinese units. The fire lances, the palace guards, the hand cannoneers that can shoot farther, the nest of bees. A lot of really iconic units for this faction. So that roughly encompasses all of the 10 old civs, including the 2 anniversary civs, and now recently we got the new Sultans Ascend factions, and we'll see if these flags all load in. So for Japan, located all the way over here off the coast of China, is one of the more unique civs added to the game. Plays with a very isolated style. Japan historically was a very isolationist nation. In game, a lot of their economy centers around their town center, which buffs all the farms nearby. Their town center is also very can be upgraded to be a very defensive, almost like a keep in and of itself, and in the late game it can even shoot rockets, but they don't get access to regular keeps. And then they have really powerful infantry with samurai and onobugeisha. They have powerful mounted units as well with the mounted samurai and the onomusha. Although historically Japan, as you can imagine, it's a relatively rocky mountainous area with not that many open pastures for grazing, so traditionally their horses were not all that strong, but in the game, I assume for balance, they gave them pretty decent horsemen as well. Let's see, the Jushi's Legacy. This is one of the variants this is the variant for China. It's basically just China again. It doesn't really have a geographical location on the map. I more or less put it in an area sort of associated with where Jushi was historically, but it's not that. It's not that distinctive an identity in general. Jushi was a scholar. Oh, sorry about that. Jushi was a scholar, I think during the Southern Song Dynasty? I'm kind of forgetting right now. Well, in any case, he was a scholar that came up, was responsible for coming up with Neo-Confucianism, which I don't know much about, so I won't comment further on it. But as a civilization, Jushi just gets basically everything that China gets, just a little bit faster. So not much more to say over there. Let's move on over to the Ayyubids. Now the Ayyubids are the variant for the Abbasids, and as you can see, I located them in Egypt because historically speaking, the Ayyubids were the dynasty of Salahuddin, who was actually the, I guess he's the Sultan who inherited this region that was previously known as the Fatimid Caliphate. Or was it the Fatimid Sultanate? I'm actually not sure now. In any case, the Fatimids were based in Egypt, and the Ayyubids' power was also centered around Egypt. I think Cairo was their capital, if it wasn't Damascus. I don't know. It was something around this region was the powerhouse. Salahuddin was obviously very famous for fighting against the Crusades, which were located in this region. And then later on, the Ayyubids would give way to the Mamluk Sultanate, which also was centered in Egypt. And the Mamluks were famous for fighting against the Mongols, defeating them at Ain Jalut, which was around this region as well. The Byzantines. Now, the Byzantines were a fan favorite. The Byzantines historically were the Roman Empire, basically the same one that was centered around Rome and conquered all of the Mediterranean. Over time, Rome split into two, and the eastern half became known as the Byzantine Empire, at least by modern day historians. To themselves, they were just known as the Romans. And the Byzantines were kind of like a Greek-centered empire, a variation of the Roman Empire that spoke Greek, believed in Greek orthodoxy, and just culturally were much more Greek than Roman, even though that they still identified as Romans themselves. Their center of power is mostly around the Aegean Sea, with most of Greece, modern day Bulgaria, Turkey. Those were their main territories. Obviously, the Ottoman Empire would eventually conquer the Byzantines and take them out of the picture completely. So these two are very, very famous rivals in history. All right, and then we have Jeanne d'Arc. Jeanne d'Arc, I placed the flag just a little bit south of the main French flag because one of Jeanne d'Arc is obviously not an empire. She's just a person that was living during the 100 Years' War. a woman who saw visions and messages from God and believed that she could inspire the French people to rise up against the English invaders. England at the time had about like half of France conquered, and they were fighting this 100 Years' War, and Jeanne was basically the turning point. One of the most significant achievements she had was relieving the siege of Orleans. I think Orleans is like located roughly here-ish toward the middle south-ish area. In any case, I might be wrong about that, but Jeanne relieved that siege and just cemented a place in herself for the legends because she was such an inspiring folk hero, and then ultimately got captured by the Burgundians, who were basically another how do I say this? When the Holy Roman Empire of Charlemagne originally fell, it split into three parts: the Frankish kingdom in the west, the Burgundians in the middle, and the what would later become just the German states in the east. And the Burgundians were kind of like this middle power that no longer exists today, but was pretty powerful back during the Middle Ages. Burgundians at various times allied with the English against the French during the 100 Years' War, and captured Jeanne and gave her to the English, who then burned her at the stake. And then we have the Order of the Dragon. Now, the Order of the Dragon, I placed it like roughly close-ish to Hungary because it was the Hungarian king, whose name escapes me now, but it was a Hungarian king who became the Holy Roman Empire. He was the guy that founded the Order of the Dragon, and the Order of the Dragon was actually a crusading militant order originally created to basically unite nobles in opposition to the encroaching Ottoman Empire. At that time, the Ottoman Empire was stretching its borders all the way up to the Balkans over here, and the Order of the Dragon was a way to get a group of knights together and say, hey, join our club, we're going to fight against the Ottomans. That being said, the order was more of a like rich boys club. It wasn't necessarily a effective military order that you would actually like create a society around, like not like the Teutonic Knights, for instance, who basically had their own state up here. So it's a little bit weird of a civilization, but I'm placing it right over here. This is not the variant that I would have picked for the Holy Roman Empire. It's kind of random. All right, so I think those are all the Sultans Ascend civilizations. Now I want to talk about the civs that I want to see added into the game. And so I'll load all those in now. One of the reasons why I don't like the existence of the Order of the Dragon as the historical inspiration for this civ is because I want to see Hungary added to the game as its own civilization. It's really weird that we have this kind of like pseudo like Hungarian, like they wear black armor, so it's kind of reminiscent of Matthias Corvinus's Black Army. Basically, Hungary at the time, nowadays we don't necessarily think of Hungary as being like necessarily a dominant military power. Did I just freeze this thing? Oh, how did I do that? Oh, okay, whatever. I guess this thing is frozen. All right, here we go. Fix that. Yeah, so nowadays we don't really think of Hungary as like being a dominant military power in Europe, but historically, Hungary was a very, very powerful state, especially during the later Middle Ages. Now, the history of Hungary, just in brief, there were something like 9 tribes that migrated from the eastern region. Around this time, they were all like, this is like the Dark Age, roughish period, roughly 700-ish AD, something like that. All kinds of peoples are migrating into the Carpathian mountain ranges. Among them were 9 tribes who were known as the Magyar, who would eventually found Hungary. By the Middle Ages, Hungary became its own power in and of itself, heavily influenced by the German states to its west. And obviously, one of the Hungarian monarchs became the Holy Roman Empire, so there's a lot of like intermarrying in across these different states. Hungary eventually would have one of the most powerful standing armies in all of Europe under Matthias Corvinus, who was a prince that had a very savvy military mindset. He established something known as the Black Army, which was this very, very powerful army. It's not clear that whether or not the Black Army actually wore black armor or black uniforms, or they were just called the Black Army to sound cool. But in any case, it's a little bit weird that like Order of the Dragon, they have black armor, and the king comes from Hungary, so I'm sure the devs were kind of thinking about the Black Army when they created this civ. I don't know, it's weird. I would have loved to see this civilization become its own civ in the game because it just has so many cool units that you could potentially draw from. Obviously, getting Hussars in the game would be awesome. Anyone who's played AOE3 won't be familiar with Hussars, so I would love to see Hussars coming back into the game. Speaking of Hussars, the other option to get Hussars is from Poland. Now, Poland, I don't know too much about their history in the medieval era, but they would eventually form the I think it was called the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. So Lithuania and Poland, they had a pretty large empire over here, one of the main rivals to what would eventually become Russia over here. The Rus, obviously, are not exactly Russia. They're the Kievan. There's all kinds of Rus. There's all kinds of peoples that were the Rus. I'm associating it here with the Kievan Rus, which is located in Ukraine. But then over time, they spread out and created all kinds of city-states: Novgorod, Moscow, and then from there, they would eventually form this kind of like united Russian Empire. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was one of the main rivals in the Eastern European theater, and they were very famous for their winged hussars, although winged hussars come at the very end of AOE4's time period, like looking at the 1500s, 1600s-ish time period, but it is a way to get hussars added into the game, so I would personally think that I would personally love to see them added in. I think winged hussars make an appearance in, yeah, they definitely make an appearance in AOE3. I think they might also make an appearance in AOE2, but I don't remember. In any case, really cool civ. One way or another, either we get Poland or we get the Magyars. We need to get hussars added into this game. Another cool thing about these two civs, though, is that they both border this region known as Bohemia, which is today known as the Czech Republic. Bohemia had a lot of famous unique units to the Age of Empires series as well, most famously the War Wagon, as well as the Hufnis, which was a siege unit in AOE2. The Bohemians were very famous in this period for they had a bit of a revolution where I forgot what the Hussites. Yeah, was it the Hussites? Yeah, I think Jan Hus was his name, or Jan Žižka. In any case, there was like a religious leader who had a group of people follow him, and they formed like this military revolution to try to, stake out their claim and live on their own. They used war wagons very, very effectively. Jan Žižka was a very famous general that helped these people basically establish their own state. Eventually, these people would serve as mercenaries to both the Hungarians and to the Poles. So while I don't think the Bohemians are quite big enough to get their own civilization the way, a lot of these other civilizations are like entire polities, I would still love to see like war wagons and Hufnises being incorporated into other civs, and I think either Hungary or Poland are good options for getting these kinds of units into the game. Anyone who's played AOE 3 will be familiar with war wagons. AOE 2 also had war wagons, although that belonged to the Koreans. And we'll actually jump all the way over to Korea right now. What a nice segue. Now, Korea during this time period was under the Joseon dynasty, and famously the Joseon dynasty fought a war of resistance against the Japanese. So the Japanese, after they finished their Sengoku Jidai, they went into Korea and tried to conquer it. Korea, with the help of the Ming dynasty China, was it Ming Dynasty China? I think it was Ming Dynasty China. Yeah. They would eventually fight it back. Very famous naval battles fought along these little crags over here in South Korea by Admiral Yi Sun-shin. So a lot of really cool stuff with Korea. They did have war wagons back in AOE 2, although that was really weird because Koreans did not really use war wagons. It was stated that the war wagons were meant to be representative of the hwacha, which is the fire cart, which we actually sort of see in AOE4 already in the form of the nest of bees. So the hwacha is kind of popularly associated with Korea. We see it in games like Civ, for instance. It could be added into AOE4, I'm hoping at least, in the form of like a more powerful nest of bees, perhaps, just to not have the same exact overlapping unit. But I'm curious to see how the devs will incorporate this civilization. In my concept for the Koreans, I was seeing the Koreans as like a very technology-focused civilization where they would get like an additional villager every single time they research another technology, and they would have very powerful art. Korea is very famous for their archery. Not only in modern day Olympics do they just rock at archery, but also back then the Japanese had a lot of arquebuses, and the Koreans had really strong archers. That was kind of like the way they fought their wars. Yeah, the Koreans also had good gunpowder units, rockets, and archery, and a very technologically focused civilization. So would love to see this. I think this is definitely a shoe-in to be added into AOE4 at some point in the future. It's such a powerful civilization historically, and a really great modern day esport nation. So would love to see them. Looking at the other Asian civs here, I have the Vietnamese. So I'm either gonna. I recently recorded a video about how I would design the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese were my first civilization concept that I've ever worked on. I think that there's so many cool things that they could do with this civilization if it got added into the game. The Vietnamese, in the modern archetype of Vietnam, a lot of Westerners will especially be familiar with Vietnam fighting these wars of attrition against America, against France, and basically, winning their independence from foreign influence. Vietnam has a long history of resisting against foreign influence. Obviously, the big neighbor to the north, China, has tried to invade Vietnam multiple times, even since the ancient times and the classical period. If you guys remember, like what's it called, the Three Kingdoms period in China, the Wu kingdom down in the southern end, they basically invaded Vietnam, and then we had the I think they were called the Lady True. I think that was that time period. Yeah, Lady True was like this badass woman warrior that led a resistance force, led a rebellion against Chinese forces. Later on, we had the I think they're called the Transistors, that also led a resistance against China. By the time of the medieval period, when we're looking at like the Dai Viet Empire, the Dai Viet are basically located in what is now northern Vietnam, and they would have quite a few resistance wars against their northern neighbors. For one is the when the Mongols tried to conquer China. The Southern Song Dynasty was still holding out strong, but the Mongols were able to come through this region here, and I think there was a kingdom known as Dali. They were able to subjugate that kingdom and then invade in through Vietnam. Their goal was to actually hit southern Song China from the south, but they decided to, since Vietnam wouldn't give passage, Vietnam I think at the time was allied with China, the Mongols decided to invade Vietnam itself, and they went in, they tried fighting. The Vietnamese put up a really powerful resistance against the Mongols, and were able to eventually win. Some really famous naval battles there with the use of steel-tipped stakes placed in rivers to trap Mongol forces. So my imagining for this civilization is that it's very trap-based, kind of like Company of Heroes, how you can place mines, or the Panzer Elite, who could like booby trap control points. I want to see a Vietnamese faction that is like centered around like placing mines and traps and like just like irregular guerrilla warfare style tactics. I think that would be a really exciting way to play AOE4. Yeah, and then later on they also fought a war of resistance against the Ming, got a lot of really powerful gunpowder weapons. This gave them the edge against their southern kingdom rival, the Champa, and eventually they were able to conquer the Chams down south. So great potential for a lot of awesome gameplay mechanics. Looking at Khmer next. Now this flag, the Khmer flag, is the black here is actually meant to just be absent space. I don't think the Khmer used a rectangular flag design. In any case, this looks looks pretty cool. The Khmer are located in modern-day Cambodia. At the time, it was known as Kamboja, and they had one of the greatest empires in Southeast Asia. A lot of their structures nowadays, if you look at like the Angkor Wat, you see their architecture. It's kind of like overgrown. It's stonework that has this overgrown, green moss all over it, and that's the aesthetic that they went with in AOE2. But historically, the buildings did not look like that. When the buildings were constructed, they were pristine. They were polished. They were painted, and they were colorful. They were not just like stone ruins with green growing all over it. So I would love to see the Khmer architecture represented in a more realistic light if it got added into AOE4. I think it is one of the best candidates to add into the game because they have a lot of really interesting mechanics. I think the fact that Khmer is, or Cambodia is 30% made, I think 30% of the geography of Cambodia is made up of wetland, like marsh and rivers and a lot of like really different terrain from what we would see elsewhere in the world. And the Khmer basically built their whole civilization founded on like adapting to this land. They have berets and irrigation channels and canals all over the place. I would love to see an empire design kind of centered around that. If you saw my concept for the Khmer, I gave them a Zerg-like creep mechanic. It's called wetlands, where as you grow the empire, the wetlands would also grow and it would impact the enemy forces as well. And then obviously they have famously the unique unit known as the Ballista Elephant, where they had ballistas riding on top of elephants being carried into battle. Now historically, ballista elephants were the reason why we see those represented at all is because we have stone relief carvings depicting ballista elephants. Now, but it's not clear whether or not the ballistas were actually used on top of the elephant, carried into battle like that, or if they were simply being transported on the back of an elephant. The latter might be more realistic, considering the fact that I'm not sure how accurate a ballista would be if it was riding on top of an elephant's back. But, for rule of cool sake, we have to include it. It's a pretty cool unique unit. All right, let's look into down south, the Majapahit. Majapahit, this region today is known as Indonesia, and this island is known as Java. And the Majapahit were a very powerful empire centered in this region called Nusantara, or Nusantara? I think Nusantara. Which represented the archipelago, the Indonesian archipelago. The Majapahit, they're famous for a few things. I need to stop my Discord notifications, sorry guys. Let me just pause that. How do I turn on streamer mode so I don't get these notifications? The Majapahit were known for a few things. The biggest thing that they're known for is their impact on the world economy, which is thanks to their monopoly on spice. Now, the Spice Islands were one of the only areas in the world that could grow certain kinds of spice, including, I think it was cloves and nutmeg. And I think there's another spice that escapes my thinking right now, but I think they're located like somewhere around here. There's like some islands over here that basically is the only place in the world where these spices can be produced, and they were very, very, very sought after by every country around the world. And the Indonesians had sole access to these spices, and through that monopoly, they could control a lot of the trade and profit off of it. On top of that, this area right here is known as the Strait of Malacca. Wait, yeah, this is Malacca, right? Yeah, I think so. I think right here, this is where Malacca is located. Oh God, how am I forgetting this right now? I think today this is known as Singapore, but Malacca is located here. In any case, a lot of international trade flowed through this strait. As you can imagine, ships traveling from India around this corner over here, and they have to go through this area. And whichever empire owns this area is obviously able to take a lot of potential taxes from any ships trying to pass through. So a lot of options for trade, a lot of options for playing around with spice as a unique resource mechanic. In my concept for the Majapahit, I gave them spice as a fifth resource that basically allowed them to train units a lot cheaper. They're also famous for their naval warfare. They had very powerful ships equipped with set bangs, I think they're called, which is like a unique Indonesian style cannon. The gun foundries in Indonesia were also very, very well known, very well respected by both the Chinese and the Dutch explorers who would later on try to conquer this area, as well as the Portuguese who also tried to influence this area. And they also had the famous Chris sword, or the Karis sword, and that's the if you've ever seen like a wavy sword, kind of like a Flameberg in later on medieval Germany. The Majapahit were known for having these swords as being a very iconic weapon in that region. So I would love to see like Chris swords wielded by Biankara, like elite guard warriors, and like awesome like set bang cannons and spice. I think there's a lot of potential with this civilization as well. Now this one over here is I'm calling this the Tamil civilization. Now the Tamils are kind of a people. It's kind of like the Rus. There's no like one kingdom called the Tamil kingdom. The biggest one that comes to mind in the medieval era is the Chola Empire, which is a little bit earlier in the time period of AOE4, but the Chola had a particularly powerful empire centered around southern India, Sri Lanka, and then also they had a lot of colonial possessions over in modern-day Malaysia as well. And this makes them one of the strongest Thessalocratic empires of southern India. Ruling this whole region. The Tamils are particularly exciting because when the game first came out, a lot of people were felt it was very controversial that the Delhi Sultanate was selected as the Indian representative civilization, because the Delhi Sultanate is actually an invasion, a civilization of invaders, at least as perceived to Hindu Indians, because the Delhi Sultanate originated from this little thing over here known as the Ghorid Empire. I'm including here the Ghorid Empire as potentially a variant of the Delhi Sultanate because they have such closely tied history. And I'll talk about the Ghorids in just a little bit, but oh wait, actually, why did I include this here? This should be included in the variant category. In any case, the Ghorids were originated from Afghanistan, and they were, kind of like the Muslim version of Crusaders, the Ghazis. They wanted to fight and spread Islam against the infidels, which they saw the Indian subcontinent as being filled with. They invaded into this area through various jihads, conquered this region, and ended up burning and pillaging a lot of Hindu sacred sites, which is kind of why the Delhi Sultanate cares a lot about sacred sites in game. It's a little bit what's the word? Almost insensitive that this civilization cares so much about sacred sites. But in any case, a lot of people were asking for a Hindu-based civilization to also represent India. And I felt like the Tamils were a great option for this because there's so many potential options for unique units from the Tamils. Now, historically, we've seen really awesome unique units added to Age of Empires coming from India, like the oh god, what's it called? Why am I forgetting right now? Wait, let me try to pull it up. What was it called? The Urumi. Yeah, so the Urumi swords are these like whip-like swords that is unique to the, I think, Kerala, which is like a state on the western tip of southern India. It's like a sword that moves like a whip, and you can have potentially multiple whips coming out of it. And basically, the way you fight with it is you swing it around, and it's like a multi-flail whip sword thing. It looks terrifying. It's a martial art still practiced today, and it was a very devastating weapon used all the way back then. Now, that being said, it's not necessarily realistic that in a real war scenario people would actually be wielding massed Urumis. I just don't see that happening because it's such a chaotic weapon that you could easily hit the guys next to you rather than just the enemy in front of you. But again, rule of cool, it's a video game. I think it'd be an awesome weapon to include. Another one I want to call out is the Qatar, or the Qatari, which is kind of like this almost like an Assassin's Creed style blade, where you hold it like a dagger. It's like a dagger, but you hold it kind of like a punch dagger. It was a unique weapon to the southern Indian subcontinent. You would see it in Vijayanagar, which was kind of like this empire centered around the Deccan Plateau, and you would also see it in the Tamil region as well. And the reason why they invented this punch dagger type of weapon, the Qatar, is that it's really good against against armor. It's got a very wide blade and a very sharp point, and you can put in a lot of thrust with your punches using it. So a lot of potential for awesome unique units here. Obviously, elephants would make an appearance here. Obviously, they would have some unique ships as well. I think in AOE2, the Dravidians is the name of this civilization, and I think they have a unique ship, like the Theravasidae or something like that. I forgot the name of it. I don't personally like the way AOE4 handles naval stuff, so I don't talk about naval stuff in my concepts, but you can imagine if this civ got included, there would be naval units as well. Alright, yeah, briefly just touching upon the grids, I just think this would be a good potential variant civilization for the Delhi Sultanate. That's it. I don't really have strong ideas on how they would be implemented in this case. Other civs I want to see here are, oh yeah, okay, Ethiopia. I haven't thought too much about how I would want to see the Ethiopians in AOE4 yet, but historically they were a Christian empire in Africa. They were very influential in a very influential region. This region near the Red Sea used to be known as the Askamite Empire, and so you can take a lot of influence from Askamite military units. And then obviously in later periods, the Ethiopians were, I think this was the only country not colonized in Africa by European powers. And I think they even won a war against the Italians when the Italians were trying to conquer them during was it the First World War that happened? In any case, this is a very powerful, strong empire with a very distinct cultural identity and a lot of cool potential unique units. They have the Shotel warriors, which are these dudes wielding these interestingly shaped curved swords that kind of look like what was it, like what are they called, Araks? Are they called Araks? I'm thinking about like the Dothraki Araks, like the ones from Game of Thrones, like the curved swords. What were they called? There's like a weapon in Egypt that had that curved sword design, but I'm forgetting the name of it. In any case, the Ethiopians have some kind. They're famous for having a sword that is shaped like that, so it would be cool to see those guys. Oromo warriors. The Oromo tribe was a very powerful military tribe as well. So a lot of really cool things there. Benin is the other African nation I'd love to see. So now Africa in general is just underrepresented in a lot of these kinds of military games, but right now we have Mali, which is better than nothing. I'm very happy that we have Mali at all. We don't actually know too much about Mali's history, like just in real life. A lot of it has been kind of lost to history. But I'm glad that we have it represented here. There are issues that I have with the way that Mali's military is represented in game. And one of the biggest issues I have is that a lot of the Malian unique units are actually coming from Benin. Like for instance, the javelin thrower, the Musafati warrior, the Musafati gunner, all those units come from the Ghanaian coastal region over here, whether it be from Benin or from the neighboring countries of the Oyo, the Dahomey. All these areas deserve their own distinct representation. I'd much rather see Dahomey and Oyo and Benin units all make it wrapped up together in a Benin civilization rather than in a Malian civilization. Mali was a Sahelian African empire, so this meant it had a very different cultural identity compared to the coastal African civilizations. The Sahel is all about trading across the trans-Saharic trade route. It's all about Islam. It's all about fast-moving, wide-sweeping cavalry and traveling along the rivers that ran through the Sahel. The coastal jungle area is a lot more. These kingdoms are a lot more isolated, a lot more city-state-like. And would not really come into large contact with the outside world until the colonial period. Another thing to cover is that the existence of the tsetse fly basically negates the potential of horses from being able to thrive in this region. The tsetse fly was a fly that would bite people and animals and give them sleeping sickness and basically kill them. So if you tried to raise horses here, they would die pretty quickly. There is cavalry in these regions, but they're just not very prominent. And so I would love to see like an infantry focused civilization being centered around this really interesting kingdom. Benin, if you've ever seen like Benin artwork, they're famous for these bronzes that depict Benin warriors. When you look at the javelin warrior, the javelin thrower for Mali, the distinct armor that they're wearing is Benin armor. It's got that like neck brace, that really interesting looking helmet. And then when you see the Musafati warriors' armor is kind of just fantasy as far as I can tell, but the swords that they're using are called Ada swords, which are distinct to Benin. They are representative of Benin royalty. And then the Musafati gunners, their uniform is very clearly inspired by the Dahomey Amazons. The Dahomey Amazons were coming from a neighboring kingdom located around here, which is in a this part's a little bit confusing. There is a historical Benin, which is in Benin City, which is in modern-day Nigeria, but there is also a modern-day country called Benin, but the modern-day country of Benin is not the historical Benin. The modern-day country of Benin is actually the historical Dahomey. So it's all very confusingly worded, and I'm not sure why the naming structure is so weird in this region. So maybe someone can educate me about that. But in any case, the Dahomey Amazons were very famous. All-women guard, an all-women King's Guard organization that were around during the 1800s. The French fought against them and famously commented on their ferocity in battle. We got a movie about them. We got a movie that depicted them called The Woman King, which is a terrible movie. Don't watch it. It's so bad. And so historically inaccurate. But in any case, badass warrior women, what's not to love? I would love to see that unit included with Benin and not with the Mali. And the Musafati in general is just like it's kind of a made up unit. There's like some vague reference to Musafatis as like a warrior woman type of identity in Mali from a long time ago, but it's not a distinct enough unit that I think it should be given its own like unit that makes up basically half of Mali's military. I don't know. It's just a little bit weird of a weird design. Another African civilization that I'd love to see here is this North African civilization that I'm calling the Amazigh. These are also known as the Moors or the Berbers, which is maybe the name that you guys might be more familiar with. This is representative of the Almohad Caliphate, Almohad Sultanate or Caliphate. I never know what the Almohad dynasty. The Almohads, the Umayyads, the Almoravids. There's all kinds of dynasties that ruled this area of North Africa that were at times subjugated by the powers in the east, and at times their own independent state. You can also think of this as Morocco, because these dynasties would eventually lead into Morocco. They'd be centered around cities like Fez. Oh my god, what's another Moroccan city? Casablanca? I don't think Casablanca was relevant in this time period. Oh my god, what's the name of the big Moroccan city? Marrakesh. Yeah, Marrakesh, Fez, maybe even Tunis. These are all like very powerful cities. This region is known as the Maghreb, which is, I think Maghreb translates to the west in Arabic. And this region fought a very distinct style of warfare that is unique to this region, that also goes back all the way back to the Carthaginian Numidian days. Those of you guys who know your ancient Roman history will be familiar with Hannibal, Hannibal Barca, who led a Carthaginian army all the way up through Spain into Italy and defeated the Romans multiple times. One of the reasons why he was able to win so handedly was thanks to his use of Numidian cavalry. Numidians were these natives from this region over here, which by the medieval era became known as Berbers or the Amazigh. Amazigh is kind of like the PC word. It's what they want to be known as, what they call themselves, whereas Berber is basically a way to just call them barbarians. So it's not really a good way to call them. In any case, the Numidians had various kingdoms down here, and they were famous for fighting with this kind of mounted javelin thrower unit. A lot of their cavalry would be light cavalry that would just skirmish and throw javelins and like run away, and they would apparently be very skilled horse riders and very effective troops in battle. So much so that the Moors, as they have invaded Spain multiple times, they actually conquered it all the way up to to here. I think only this like tiny area up here known as the Kingdom of Asturias was left standing. Everything else was conquered, and they were so effective at fighting that both Spain and Portugal would adopt a lot of Amazigh ways of fighting. So the Amazigh were one of the tribes of the Amazigh was known as the Zenata tribe, and the Zenata were particularly potent warriors with this mounted javelineer type of combat style. The Zenata were so famous that other Zenata units were made among the Spanish and the Portuguese, but as the word got translated over, it became Zenata became Jinete or Hinete. And so if you are familiar with like AOE3 or AOE2, AOE2 had Genitors, and then AOE3 had the Jinete, which are a Portuguese unique unit, or Portuguese imperial upgrade for the Dragoons, I think. In any case, the use of these kinds of mounted skirmishing javelineers was prominent in both of these countries as well. So I would love to see a civilization kind of built around that, as well as camel traders. I'd love to see some camel traders included into the game. And this kind of leads me naturally into Spain and Portugal. These are two very, very, very popularly requested civilizations. I think also because Spain and Portugal had obviously a ton of influence on the New World, and so a lot of people, if you're coming from Latin America, you might see Spain as like your medieval identity, the same way like Americans would look to England as like the the closest related medieval parallel. Now Spain, I did a concept for them that was focused around like gaining tempo through the Reconquista. Most of their history in this time period was just like pushing the Moors, the Umayyads, the various Muslim dynasties out of the Iberian Peninsula, conquering all the way down to the tip, taking back Granada, and then from there establishing a united form of Spain. Spain at the time was split into multiple different kinds of kingdoms. We had Castile, Leon, Navarre, Aragon. All these kingdoms would eventually unite and form what we now know as Spain. I would love to see, maybe Jinetes would be a good unit for this faction. Maybe the Almogavars, which are these like skirmishing light infantry, would be cool. I would love to see like a Tercio type of unit. If you're familiar with AOE3, the Spanish had the Tercio pikemen, and they had Rodolero swordsmen. Seeing some kind of like fast-moving men-at-arms would also be really cool with the civilization, I think. And then with the Portuguese, I would love to see a slightly different identity. I'm working on a Portuguese concept right now after a lot of people have requested it. The Portuguese, I want to see an identity not centered around just the Reconquista, because if the Spanish have the Reconquista, the Portuguese should have something else. So for the Portuguese, I'm thinking about focusing on their history around trade and economic development. So Portugal at the time, yes, they did participate in the Reconquista the same way the Spanish did. They were able to carve out their own unique identity and even fought a few wars of resistance against invading Castilian forces. But from there, they would go out and colonize the Azores. They would colonize various parts of North and West Africa, and then create trading posts all along these regions and go into Brazil and India, all the way over to Japan. So they had a very, very distinct and powerful colonial identity, even in this early medieval period. So I would love to see that being represented in the game. And I think their use of feitorias, which were basically medieval factories, these like trading posts, that would be like the core identity of this civilization. And I'd also love to see Portuguese crossbowmen get highlighted. I think they were called Besteiros do Canto, I think they were called. In any case, there were various unique crossbow units that were organized by the Portuguese crown, and I would love to see that as a unique unit highlighted here. All right, and that is all of the civs that I would want to see. Now I want to talk about the New World civs. Okay, so obviously if we include Portugal and Spain, we gotta include the New World as well. Now I had a lot of thoughts about how to do the New World civilizations, because it's not the game currently has this formula. Every civilization has the stables with cavalry. Every civilization has siege weapons from their siege workshop, and the New World simply doesn't have cavalry, and it doesn't have a siege workshop. They don't have large siege weapons. They don't have gunpowder weapons. So how would you include a civilization like this? And I'm going to take a slight water break. Now, there's a lot of ideas around how to include New World civilization in AOE4. My thinking is that they should just take some shortcuts here. For siege weapons, just give them the standard siege roster. Like, it doesn't quite make sense that there would be, like, you know, Aztecs with trebuchets and bombards, but it's too much of an effort to balance an entirely different siege roster for these factions. I think that they should just have standard siege weapons. Maybe some distinctions here and there, but just, you know, allow people to kind of like do their own dots, connect their own dots. Back in AOE2, the Aztecs also just had regular siege weapons, the same as everyone else. So I think it's not that big of a deal. And then with regards to cavalry, I think it's fine to just give them shock infantry. Shock infantry is basically infantry that fulfills a cavalry role. So they're cavalry in every single way except for visual appearance. And obviously they would have to be given some kind of different kind of visual treatment so that you can easily read whether or not they're cavalry units. But this is what they did back in AOE3 as well. They had a lot of infantry units that were just served the role as cavalry, but were called shock infantry. So that's what I would want to see with these civilizations. And for gunpowder units, maybe there's ways you can avoid it. I have some ideas. Maybe you can use like slingers instead of gunpowder units, or maybe you can have like import gunpowder units, something like that. In any case, I want to talk about the civilizations I want to see added. Now, obviously the Aztecs are the easiest one to include. I did a poll asking you guys which Native American civilizations you'd most want to see, and the Aztecs definitely reign supreme. And, you know, Aztecs, they got sacrifices, they got the Jaguar warriors, the Eagle warriors. We kind of already know what they're all about. Obviously, I would love to see them rendered in AOE4 because their uniforms are just so vibrant and distinct. You know, it's going to be awesome. The other civs were not as popular. They were all about equal popularity on the poll, which I was a little bit surprised about because I thought the Incans were the obvious other shoe-in. The Incans were included in AOE3, and they were the other like major empire. You know, North America had the Aztecs, South America had the Incans, basically. This is a civilization that, you know, they're not all about the sacrifices and stuff, not as much as the Aztecs are, at least. They're more about, they have a really well-connected road network that connected, their empire is very thin and very mountainous, so they don't really conquer into these areas. They mostly just stay along the coastal regions over here, from modern day Peru all the way down to Chile. And they have a really well connected road infrastructure with various checkpoints called tambos, where they would send messengers called chasqui to run from tambo to tambo as they deliver their messages. They're a very centralized state with the emperor known as the Inca. He was basically in control of everything, and also the currency and writing were not very. My understanding is that currency was not utilized in the Incan Empire, or at least like it was relatively primitive. Instead, a lot of their currency centered around the what's known as the mita system, which is kind of like a state tax, but it wasn't a tax centered around money. It was instead a tax centered around services. So the mita was kind of like a labor tax, and so for a portion of each year, people would be expected to contribute to large state projects, whether it be like working in the mines or building some kind of monumental architecture or serving in the military. And let's see. Aside from that, yeah, I was thinking that the civilization would kind of be built around like architecture, roads, something related to the mita system as well. I haven't thought too much beyond that. Obviously, the Incans have very powerful slingers, the Huraka, I think they're called, and the Bolus warriors. These were two of the distinct units from AOE3 for the Incans, and I would love to see them included in this game as well. And I would also love to see like Sapa Inca guards, like the dudes with the halberds that you see rendered in some games, like in Civ. Yeah, that'd be pretty awesome to include as well. Up next is the Mayans. Now the Mayans have a lot of cultural overlap with the Aztecs. I think a lot of people kind of like use them interchangeably, but they were actually a very distinct and different culture from the Aztecs. They're not quite as much about sacrifices, for one. And I'm gonna do another water break. I've been talking nonstop for quite a while now. The Mayans, I was thinking that if there was a Mayan civilization included in the game, this is a great opportunity to highlight the Mayan calendar. Now, the Mayan calendar is probably one of the most famous aspects of the Mayans, at least as it's known popularly in the West. The Mayans had very, very advanced astronomical knowledge and also advanced mathematical knowledge, and that's something I would want to emphasize with this civilization, is like being more technologically focused, and having a calendar system that, like, you can imagine like this is playing out in different phases. Like, as you move through the game, you'll be in like a, I don't know, like a economic production phase, and then the calendar will shift and you'll be in like a military phase or whatever, and you have to, like, as you're playing it, adapt to the different calendar time periods that you're going through. So I feel it would be almost like a little bit of a pseudo random kind of civilization. You have to kind of like change with the changing calendar, which I think would be a really fun and unique way to design a civilization. And the last one here is the Mississippians. Now, I wanted to include some kind of like North American civilization. The Mississippians was the best candidate. This is a relatively unknown civilization, at least to popular history. But there's been a lot of really compelling research being done in, you know, just the past 50 years, unearthing a lot of what used to be a really great civilization located in the heart of modern day America. And the Mississippians were particularly focused around the city-state of Cahokia and the outlying city-states around it. The Mississippians were not an empire in their own right. Rather, it was a collection of variously associated cultures that actually tie in intricately with a lot of modern day Native American tribes. They were famous for building the mound pyramids. They were also known as the mound builders. And there's a lot of like American kind of good old American racism kind of tied into our understanding of the Mississippians. When American settlers first arrived here and they discovered these huge monumental mounds, they thought that there must have been a white people that had arrived previously that built these large structures, because there was no way that the natives here could have possibly built them. And this like mythical white people was known as the mound builders for a long time, until eventually it was proven that they were built by the natives that have been here for this whole time, obviously, and there's no like, you know, mythical race of white people that came to North America in the past. The mound builders have civilizations almost similar to the Aztecs in a sense, where there's like a central pyramid. The pyramid is usually some kind of important grave site for past leaders of the civilization. They have evidence of strong astronomical knowledge. They have their own almost like a Stonehenge-like architectural piece, and just like the cities that they built were massive, some of the biggest in the world at the time, and also very multicultural. There's evidence of a lot of trade coming in from all various kinds of people feeding into this region, and there's evidence of mounds all over this area, not only in this Mississippi region, but also all the way down to Florida and through Tennessee. Basically, a lot of our popular stereotypes of the forest-dwelling Native American is pretty false, and a lot of that comes from the fact that once the Europeans did land, a lot of disease went through and just absolutely destroyed these civilizations. Living in urban centers was obviously not good for the spread of disease, and so a lot of these civilizations would collapse after the arrival of the Spanish, and by the time the Europeans arrived to the North American area, most of these civilizations were ghost towns, and they distributed into the woodlands around them. So for modern day ancestors, we have what was it, the Choctaw, the Seminoles, the Muskogee. There's various tribes that still exist today that do inherit a direct connection to the Mississippians. I think the Huron was also kind of related, or at least there's like culturally they're kind of similar. So I think this is also a great civilization to take inspiration from neighboring tribes that weren't necessarily directly related. This would be similar to how like Benin, I'm imagining Benin using like unique units from other kinds of coastal Ghanaian African countries. I would imagine the Mississippians taking inspiration, having units that look more like our conception of the Iroquois, like an Iroquois tomahawk type of unit, or maybe not Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee, as they're known in AOE3, Huron type of armor, or maybe some like Seminole type designs. Just like take inspiration from all of these different regions, all wrapped up into the civilization. I think that would be really cool, and it would be awesome to see the mounds represented in a game like this. And just in general, it's such a cool civilization that so few people know about. We need more popular media representations of the Mississippians. All right, that covers it for the New World civilizations, and the last thing I want to talk about is the variant civilizations. Now, these are just some variant ideas I have, just on a vague level. For the English, I personally want to see Richard the Lionheart. I did a poll asking you guys what you guys wanted to see, and Richard the Lionheart was at the top. I was imagining Richard the Lionheart as a Crusader style civilization, like the English, but with Crusaders. Centered around basically, I don't think, there have been some debate around like the Crusaders, the Kingdom of Jerusalem having their own civ, but I feel like when for a full-fledged civ in AOE4, it has all the language recordings, all the music recordings, all the art and the units and everything. The a Kingdom of Jerusalem civilization just overlaps too much with everything else that we've already seen. France, England, HRE, they already kind of do a good job of covering like a medieval European aesthetic. The Middle Eastern kingdoms like the Abbasids and the Ottomans already kind of cover a lot of this stuff as well. Kingdom of Jerusalem just would have too much overlap with everything else that we already see in the game. So I personally don't think it's fitting for its own civilization. That's why I think it fits better as a English variant, or potentially another kind of variant civilization. The other option for a variant, and this is a bit controversial, a lot of you guys were saying that you want to see Scotland as its own as an English variant. Now, the way I imagine variants going is that they're not going to do voice recordings, they're not going to do new music recordings. It's just too much production value. So if we get a Scotland and I don't hear bagpipes and I don't hear Scottish voice lines, it's just not going to feel like Scotland for me. So I think Scotland, if they were to include Scotland or include like some kind of like Celtic Gaelic type of civilization that kind of unites all these various kind of cultures, I think that deserves its own civilization outright. And it would be awesome to see, but probably not as the English variant. And let's see what else here. For the Rus, I included the I think this is the flag of Novgorod. Alexander Nevsky is kind of like the famous king who defended Novgorod against was it the Golden Horde, I think. And so Novgorod, like right now, currently the Rus is kind of centered mostly around Moscow. It would be cool to see a variant version of it that is centered around Novgorod. I don't know how it would be distinct necessarily, but that's just my big idea. The Golden Horde. This is the flag of the Golden Horde. This would be a great candidate as a variant of the Mongols. I'm not sure exactly how the Golden Horde would play, but it just seems like probably the most famous splinter of the Mongol Empire that could be a variant. Another option is the Timurids right here, the flag of the Timurids, led by Timur the Lame. He's like kind of like a second coming of Genghis Khan. Now the Timurids are actually a Turkish empire, so it's not exactly Mongolian, so it's a little bit, the connection's a little bit vague here. So maybe the Golden Horde would be a little bit better though. Down here in India, I included the Rajputs. Now, the Rajputs had a famous rivalry against the Delhi Sultanate. They fought various wars against each other, but were ultimately subjugated by the Delhi Sultanate. They have their own distinct identity. They have a lot of really cool armors and weapons that I would love to see rendered in game. But one of their most distinct mechanics is probably like the village fortress mechanic, which Delhi has incorporated into its civilization. So it's a bit weird that it's actually incorporated into Delhi, but the Rajputs were famous for having really powerful fortified towns. So yeah, if that mechanic stays with Delhi, I don't see the Rajputs necessarily happening. But and the fact that the Rajputs, culturally, linguistically, are just like so different from Delhi, I don't see it being a variant civ. But it could be cool as its own civ, standalone civ. And is that it? Is that everything that I wanted to talk about? Yeah. Wow. I think I covered it. All right. I am definitely in need of another water break. If you listen to this, thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you think about the civilizations I picked here, and whether or not you agree with everything that I put down. And yeah, isn't it cool that we could that AOE4 is a game that has such a flexible design that it could potentially incorporate all of these different and amazing civilizations. I really hope that the game continues being developed and that we actually get some of these. But at the current pace it's going, I don't know, we might only get like a handful of new civs. We'll see how it goes. I love seeing what the devs do with the new civs in this game. All right, well, anyways, that's enough talking from me. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, consider giving a like, consider subscribing for more content about AOE4, and yeah, for all those out there that are still here, stay frosty, stay chilly.